Allow me to now introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Luis Benvisite. Dr. Luis is the Global Director for Education at the World Bank, and previously he was the Human Development Regional Director for Latin America and the Caribbean at the World Bank. And he is the co-author of the World Development Report 2012, Gender Equality and Development. Dr. Luis' research interests focus on education finance, gender, student assessment, practices, and teacher policies. And he is the author and co-author of several articles and books. Dr. Benvisite received his BA in psychology from Harvard University and a PhD in international comparative education from Stanford University. Today, Luis will talk about working together to end learning poverty. We are privileged to have you, Luis. The floor is yours.
Good morning, good evening, everyone. It's such an honor to be joining you for this wonderful event hosted by Queen Rania Teacher Academy. I firmly support the forum's call to elevate education through partnerships, and I believe that collaboration is more important than ever as we all strive to strengthen education systems and elevate learning. So I'm thrilled to be with you today to learn from you and share about our work at the World Bank, together with partners to end learning poverty. Next slide, please. For learning to fulfill its promise to individual students and families, to communities, and to nations, we need to put learning at the center of our education systems and ensure that these systems facilitate learning. This premise lies at the heart of the World Bank's 2018 World Development Report, which guides our work on education. As part of this approach, we recognize that to realize education's promise, we need to assess learning to make it a serious goal. We need to act on evidence in ways that make schools work for learning. And we need to align stakeholders to make the entire education system work for learning. To this end, partnerships are essential to the process of realizing education's promise. Next slide, please. To provide a bit of context for how this approach plays out, the World Bank is the largest financier of education in the developing world, and we work with nearly 100 countries to help them reach Sustainable Development Goal 4 on quality education for all. Our nearly $27 billion in commitments to projects focused on low and middle income countries reaches over 304 million students. We're dedicated to working with governments and partners to bring together the commitment, technical expertise, and financing needed to strengthen education systems in countries around the globe and ensure that every child has a chance to gain the knowledge and the skills they need to prosper in a rapidly changing world.
We can see you, maybe until the team can fix it, Luis, maybe you can talk a little bit about the global issue which faces the learning poverty globally, till we can come back to the slides, if you don't mind. And
sure.
and what measures the World Bank is taking to tackle this issue.
Let me continue. So to provide a bit of context for how this approach plays out, the World Bank is the largest financier of education in the developing world, and we work with nearly 100 countries to help them reach SDG 4 on quality of education for all. Our nearly 27 billion in commitments to projects focused in low and middle income countries reaches over 304 million middle income students. We're dedicated to working with governments and partners to bring together the commitment, the technical expertise, and financing needed to strengthen education systems in countries around the globe and ensure that every child has a chance to gain the knowledge and the skills they need to prosper in a rapidly changing world. In case you're seeing the slides, let me just point that we continue.
Yeah, please continue. We'll let you know once we see the slides, but you can continue, please, Luis. Yeah.
So despite this very large portfolio, we recognize that much more is needed. Learning poverty, which reflects the proportion of students who cannot read and understand a simple text by age 10, remains persistently high, rising from 57% across low and middle income countries in 2019 to an estimated 70% in 2022, even as education spending has grown. The learning crisis is a long-standing challenge, and COVID and the ensuing school closures only deepened the learning challenges faced by students and education systems around the world. Across the Middle East and North Africa region, learning poverty is a persistent issue too. Before COVID, learning poverty was higher in MENA than the global average at about 63%. And simulations estimate that learning poverty in MENA now sits around 70%. That is 7 out of 10 students cannot read an age-appropriate paragraph by age of 10. Now, the latest data from the PEARLS assessment, which measures reading achievement of grade 4 students and is used as an input to measure reading learning poverty, shows some progress, and that's good news. Most of the 8 MENA countries that participated in PEARLS found improvements in reading, with overall scores improving and fewer students failing below the minimum proficiency level for reading. The gap between the lowest and highest performers decreased as well, showing progress in ensuring all students are learning. Still, the gaps remain high and the overall scores remain low, so more needs to be done. In MENA and beyond, our work could not be achieved without deep partnerships with a wide range of collaborators. We build relationships with strategic partners whose priorities align to ours, including sovereign donors, foundations, philanthropies, and the private sector. Our partnerships take multiple forms, including technical partnerships and collaborative funding efforts, where we leverage the World Bank portfolio with donor funding to amplify our impact. Partnerships are also an important part of our work to build the education evidence base and share knowledge that can inform policy and practice. We all know far too well how even with the best of intentions, interventions can fail when they're not well grounded in the evidence of how to promote learning, how to support teachers, and how to strengthen learning systems. Partnerships play a crucial role in our efforts to build evidence base, share this evidence, and support governments and our partners to examine and act on that evidence in ways that make sense for their contexts. This work would not be possible without relationships with partners of all types. Public-private partnerships can be an important strategy to help elevate education. An example of this comes from the West Bank, where the Palestinian Authority's Public-Private Partnership, or PPP, leverages private kindergarten providers to expand quality early childhood education services to underserved areas. Even prior to the current crisis, public provision of kindergarten services has been very limited in the West Bank, accounting for only around 10% of services, so private providers play a crucial role in maintaining and expanding kindergarten access. In 2022, around 1/3 of 5-year-olds had not been enrolled in kindergartens, and in the past year, the kindergarten sector has witnessed high dropout rates as parents withdraw their children due to household income losses. Under several PPP models piloted in the 2023-2024 school year, private kindergarten providers were funded by the Ministry of Education for each additional child they enrolled, conditional on meeting established enrollment and quality standards. Kindergartens under the PPP were also provided financing to invest in new furniture, facilities, and professional development, so that the ministry provided support under a voucher model and a service delivery model. analysis had found that many private providers had idle capacity, such as classrooms with fewer students than the maximum class size, or additional rooms in facilities that could be turned into classrooms. So a voucher model was designed to leverage this existing capacity. It was also found that some areas were underserved with little or no private provision, meaning that new schools were needed. So the service delivery model was designed to incentivize private providers to expand services in those areas. In total, the pilot PPP successfully contracted 17 kindergartens, operationalizing 33 classrooms and enrolling 690 children. The PPP also initiated a supplementary financing plan to pay tuition fees for children who dropped out of non-PPP classrooms in the wake of the crisis and intensified financial strains among families. Through the emergency funding mechanism, 305 children in 11 kindergartens were supposed to re-enroll. This program in the West Bank highlights the important role that public-private partnerships can play in enhancing education access, ultimately helping to elevate education for all.
Luis,
Please.
sorry, Luis. We can see the slides now. Where are which slides? So we can move the slides.
We're going to slide 7, please. Through our partnership with governments, the private sector and other partners, we work to support education at every angle to ensure that learners are prepared and motivated to learn, that teachers at all levels are effective and valued, and that classrooms are equipped for learning, that schools are safe and inclusive spaces, and that education systems are well managed. As we gather today, we recognize the importance of all 5 of these goals, and especially the importance of teachers who are well prepared and well supported throughout their careers. Teachers are the single most important school-based determinant of student learning, and all students should have great teachers who are well prepared and well supported. Next slide, please. I have no doubt that this is top of mind throughout this forum. Teachers are essential for elevating education systems. Strong teachers increase student achievement at all levels. A student with a greater teacher learns far more than students of average teachers. So much so that moving from a low-performing teacher to a high-performing one can raise student learning by the equivalent of multiple years of schooling. Teachers also play a key role in implementing the interventions that we know have the most impact on student learning. For instance, teaching to match students' learning levels, as we see in approaches like teaching at the right level, can be powerful for promoting learning. To be able to do this, teachers need to be well prepared and well supported throughout teacher education and development opportunities that help them continually strengthen their skills for complex teaching tasks. Other approaches too, such as structured pedagogy interventions, rely on teachers for effective implementation, underscoring that teachers are a critical player in the learning process. Next slide, please. Unfortunately, many teachers across the world do not reach adequate preparation and development, and the teaching career faces many challenges in attracting and retaining great teachers. These challenges mean that far too often, teaching quality is too low to support effective learning. As you can see here, data collected by the World Bank's Teach Classroom Observation tool found that many teachers across different regions struggle with key teaching domains, including providing feedback to students, fostering critical thinking, social and collaborative skills, encouraging student autonomy and perseverance, and checking for understanding. These findings highlight the need to better prepare and support teachers throughout their careers if we are to realize education's promise. Next slide, please. With this challenge in mind, the World Bank invests heavily in helping countries strengthen their teacher policies. Through hundreds of projects and billions of dollars of investment in education, we've seen the value of collaborative partnerships to strengthen the teacher pipeline and elevate education systems. This work requires close engagement across a wide range of partner types: government, civil society, philanthropic organizations, development partners, private sector actors, and many others. We work to foster evidence-aligned policy design and implementation, but we know that effective policy and governance look different in different settings, and contextualization is key, even while attending to the evidence base. Finally, a rigorous education system and effective teaching and learning require attention to all stages of the teacher career. The work of the Queen Rania Teacher Academy highlights how rigorous teacher education and development can help transform an education system. We also need to look at every stage of the teaching career. Next slide, please. Taking a holistic view of strengthening and supporting a pipeline of teachers for improved student learning starts with attracting and selecting excellent candidates, providing high-quality initial teacher education that equips prospective teachers with the knowledge and skills they'll need, deploying teachers equitably to schools where they match the linguistic and cultural background of the students, providing rigorous support to novice teachers through induction programs, and providing continuous professional development and career growth opportunities. Throughout this process, systems also need to plan for and effectively manage the teacher workforce, ensuring sufficient accountability mechanisms and providing high-quality teaching resources and pedagogical support personnel. Next slide, please. As many of us know all too well, this first stage of the pipeline, attracting and selecting strong teachers, is a challenge in many contexts and is one of the most and major factors behind the urgent teacher shortages we're seeing around the world. The challenge lies not only in attracting and retaining enough teachers, but in attracting top talent into the profession. As you can see here, PISA data from 2015 shows that secondary school students who wanted to become engineers had higher reading and math scores than those who wanted to become teachers. Next slide, please. Several factors drive this challenge to attract great candidates into teaching. Poor working conditions are a major reason. Murky deployment processes also contribute in some settings. Far too often, the teaching profession is seen as a low-status path, sometimes as a less professional option than other routes. In some settings, teachers are paid significantly less than other professions requiring similar education and qualifications. Tackling all of these challenges will be critical for attracting strong candidates into the profession. This will require better working conditions and deployment systems, comprehensive efforts to make teaching more prestigious, including more career growth opportunities and high-quality professional development opportunities. In some settings, higher teacher salaries are also a key step to making teaching a compelling path for strong candidates. Finally, policies that recruit a diverse range of candidates who reflect the backgrounds, cultures, languages, and experiences of students in the whole school system can benefit students, teachers, and the education system as a whole. Next slide, please. Initial teacher education is the next step in the teacher pipeline. Initial teacher education is the focus of an ongoing World Bank study exploring these key themes. The study will be published next spring, and we look forward to sharing with you. Preliminary findings highlight the need to see initial teacher education as its own complex system, to prioritize contextualized solutions, to invest in improving the quality of establishments alongside efforts to raise the number of teachers in settings experiencing teacher shortages, and to make strong, consistent links between theory and practice. High-quality teacher education is an opportunity to break the cycle of poor teaching by showing models of teaching that differ from those that the student teachers experience in their own early education. And in this way, initial teacher education holds tremendous potential to help build strong education systems that elevate teaching and learning. Next slide, please. In addition to initial teacher education, ongoing efforts to build teachers' knowledge, skills, and capacity throughout their careers are essential. Teacher professional development is a major area of World Bank investment. For continuous professional development to best serve teachers and their students, we know that context matters, so continuous professional development approach that works in one setting may not be the best, most effective, or efficient in another, based on the available capacity, resources, and norms in a given system. There are many models of professional development, including school-based group and collaborative learning. Across any effective model, teachers need to be actively engaged in their own learning. Lesson enactment should be incorporated into training, so that it is not only about principles, but about practicing them with other teachers before going back into the classroom. And effective professional development programs tend to have a clear subject-content focus. Overly generalized professional development will not have much impact on teachers' practice in the classroom. Amidst enthusiasm for digital solutions, the evidence points to the benefit of starting with a face-to-face learning opportunity and not having entirely virtual training. And finally, a wide range of evidence highlights the need to follow up and provide feedback and time for reflection. Next slide, please. We actually know a lot about what works when it comes to teacher policy. Countless studies, impact evaluations, and other research have helped us to understand the ingredients of successful teacher policy. Yet, we're not seeing the needed changes that take place in classrooms. In our report on making teacher policy work, we asked ourselves why, despite the growing evidence on effective teacher policies, we still do not observe high-quality teaching and learning in the classroom. The report argues that we need to go beyond what works in teacher policy to how to support teachers in different contexts to adopt what works, while making sure it is implementable at scale and can be sustained over time. Next slide, please. Effective teacher policies facilitate individual level change by addressing barriers that teachers face in making the targeted changes. To increase the likelihood that a policy will have its intended impact, policymakers need to identify the changes that a policy aims to facilitate and then diagnose what barriers stand in the way of this change. To do so, policymakers can ask themselves 3 questions. Is the targeted change clear for teachers? Is the targeted change doable for teachers? Is the targeted change rewarding for teachers? Policymakers can then put in place strategies to mitigate the identified barriers, moving the focus from only what changes are expected of teachers to also how to support teachers to achieve these outcomes in a given context is a critical step toward making teacher policy work. Next slide, please. To identify what elements may impact the sustainability and scale of a teacher policy in a particular context, policymakers can ask themselves these three questions. First, is the policy operationally feasible? In other words, do we have adequate resources, funding, and technical and management capacity to implement the policy at scale and over time? Second, is it politically acceptable? In other words, do we have an enabling political environment to implement the policy? Have we built trust and coalitions with critical interest groups as to ensure that the critical elements of the policy will be preserved over time? And third, do we have data and data systems available to help prioritize, adapt, and iterate the policy? Next slide, please. These two goals cannot be achieved unless teachers and learners are at the center of policymaking. Maintaining a clear focus on teachers and their experiences in the classroom and beyond can help policymakers design and implement education policies that will successfully prepare and support teachers throughout their careers and ensure that they are well equipped to foster student learning. At the system level, teachers and teachers' organizations are key stakeholders to make sure policies are politically acceptable and can be scaled and sustained over time. Working with teachers and teacher organizations to incorporate how policies are perceived, understood, internalized by teachers is more crucial than ever. Likewise, the many partners gathered here today, policymakers, teachers groups, donors, researchers, civil society, and others, all play an important role in ensuring that teachers and learners' experiences, perspectives, needs, ideas are at the center of education policy and practice. Next slide. Finally, as we look to elevate education systems, we must focus on harnessing school education for climate action. Learning, teachers, and climate action are inextricably tied in today's education landscape, and partnerships will be essential to ensure that we're building education systems that can be resilient in the face of climate dangers and work to combat them. And next slide. I'd like to end with this reminder that education is a human right, a powerful driver of development, and one of the strongest instruments for reducing poverty, improving health, promoting gender equality, peace, resilience, and adaptation to climate change. I'm delighted to have had this opportunity today to discuss these issues with you, and I look forward to learning more from the forum's esteemed guests. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Luis. Thank you for this very, very informative and definitely enlightening presentation. And I really apologize for the technical challenge we had at the beginning of the presentation, but it always happens, unfortunately. So sometimes we have to live with it, but we're trying to avoid it.
And we made it work. We showed that we were resilient. And
exactly.
we can work through challenges.
Exactly. Definitely each slide shed light on different issue. Definitely I would say every education system can relate to it, whether we're talking about teacher shortage or selection or retention or the core issue of learning poverty itself, and definitely the teacher policies. And we still have a few minutes. I would like to ask you a couple of questions if you don't mind, and definitely for any one of our attendees would like to ask, please write down your question and we'll ask it to Luis. Luis, the World Bank is leading education, I would say, globally. And in my speech, I said that there are a lot of common challenges, and the world is We can see convergence in many of the challenges in different sectors, and one of them education. So based on your observation and based definitely on the great work the World Bank is doing in different areas of the world, what are the common challenges that you see in the Middle East, in Latin America, and Africa, or in Europe that requires immediate attention by the policymakers and definitely by the different stakeholders?
Okay, as I said in my talk, we know that teachers are perhaps the most important element of how to ensure that children are able to take benefit from a high quality education. So supporting teachers and teacher policy really is at the very, very center of the work that we do, and we dedicate much of our attention to how to facilitate an enabling environment that allows teachers to perform at their best. That's from beginning at the very early stages of recruitment, all the way to sort of preparing teachers to go into the classroom, and then sort of how to support them throughout their careers and to ensure that they have those necessary pedagogical support elements like textbooks and materials that sort of are useful to in the teaching and learning process in the classroom, and then to sort of ensure that they are able to access continuous professional development to stay at the top of their game. Also, how to support principals and district or decentralized level or administrators to ensure that teachers have the enabling environment to being able to perform, and then how systems of education are able to have the data systems or the administrative systems that are necessary again to ensure that teachers in their classrooms
أن المعلم
perform at their best.
يؤدون على أكمل وجه.
So in that sense, I think that we are have a single-minded focus around sort of putting teacher at the center of education policy, and because we know that again sort of that the magic that takes place in the classroom, that the teaching and learning experience is the key to ensure that all children are able to acquire those essential, fundamental, foundational skills that are the key to success in work and in life.
Yeah, great, thank you. Another question, Lewis, as you know, I mean, if we take the MENA region as one of the regions of the world, and there is the key challenge we are facing is unemployability, and the young population, I would say. While there is a misalignment between the education system, the outputs of the education system, and the needs of the labor market. And so what advice you give to the education systems in the MENA region to bridge that gap between what the education system produce and what is really needed, and how they can work to develop the skills of the different students? I mean, I'm not talking about K-12, but also including the higher education students as well.
Yes, you raise such an important subject. At the end of the day, education systems have to support the next generation to get those key skills that are relevant for work and for life. We know that education is perhaps one of the most important pathways for social mobility, for being able to grow individually and professionally, and ultimately for people to get sort of the types of jobs that they want. And so avoiding those skills mismatches that you made reference to are just so key. So the first step is to ensure that all children acquire those fundamental, foundational skills: numeracy, literacy, social-emotional skills, digital skills, that are just so critical to build further skills. Skills beget skills. And so the first step is just to, again, ensure that those foundational skills are strong. And in the MENA region, as I mentioned in my talk, still a large number, the majority of children, do not acquire those fundamental skills by the age of 10. And then we need those technical, and cognitive skills that are important for the labor market. And in that sense, again, sort of having education systems that are attuned to the needs of the labor market. So, a lot of the theme of this conference is about partnerships. It's about sort of ensuring that there are these linkages and there's that correspondence between education systems and the world of work with civil society stakeholders, with broader sort of community organizations, to make sure that there is that important alignment and resilience, and ultimately so education systems can respond to the needs of society.
Yeah, definitely. It requires a lot of work from the different stakeholders, and this is the core theme of our forum. And when we met last week, Luis, you and I talked about the misconception sometimes from people about privatization versus building partnerships. Sometimes when people think of work between the public and the private sector, they think of privatization and selling, the government's assets to the private sector. So, what message you can share with people that
كذلك فما هي الرسالة التي يمكنكم
message à cet égard?
there is and the great work the World Bank has done globally in terms of different types of engaging for the private sector or the PPP models. And again, maybe in Jordan or the region as well. But you still sometimes you hear people talk about they are selling the public assets to the private sector when they enter into a partnership. How we can work to at least to minimize this ambiguity?
We oftentimes say that it takes a village to raise a child. And that means that it takes all kinds of stakeholders to support an education system. It requires the public sector, the private sector, civil society, philanthropies, so a wide variety of stakeholders. And so it's important that we all do our share, we all do our part to ensure that the next generation begets those important skills that will be the foundation for a rich, healthy, productive life. And so it's not about public versus private. It's about public and private. It's about sort of how households, how families, how education systems, how the private sector and civil society can all play an important role in facilitating that teaching and learning process. And ultimately how we can all come together in support of schools, in support of classrooms, in support of teachers.
I have a question from my friend Dr. Malak Zalouk from Egypt. So she's asking, what advocacy initiatives are you engaged with as a World Bank with the governments and private sector to empower teachers?
Oh, we're very involved. We are big champions of teachers and the teaching profession. As again, I mentioned in my talk, we are in the midst of preparing an important global report, our first on initial teacher education, because we believe that in the same way that we advocate that foundational skills and those early years are so important for children to start in life, we also believe that it's true for teachers, that in order for a teacher to have a rich, healthy career, you need to start as strong as possible. And in that sense, initial teacher education becomes the gateway for that. And again, as I mentioned in my talk, we also know that a student who is in a classroom with an above average teacher learns many, many times more than those that are that have a below average teacher. So that, the teacher is really sort of the potentiator, the enabler of much of the learning that takes place. And so being able to focus on having starting out a teaching career as strong as possible really becomes a long-term solution, a long-term pathway that hopefully will make continuous professional development easier, more productive, and perhaps less necessary than it is today.
Thank you. I think Dr. Mark satisfies with the answer, definitely. One last question, Luis, then I promise I will close this conversation. Again, you talked about the global shortage of teachers, which is a global challenge, and the international reports, the UNESCO reports, talks about the need maybe for 60 million teachers by 2040, and at the same time, I mean, it's an issue of supply and demand. You find country like Jordan, there is a more supply than demand. And if you go to, for example, Germany, there is a huge teacher shortage, for example, or the United States even, and now they're turning even to high school graduates to cover some of the teaching jobs. So what's going on globally in terms of the rhetoric? How the international organization can work together in terms of making the mobility of the teaching workforce easier globally? I mean, to cover that, at least to minimize the gap. Where they go to a country like Jordan, where the more teachers than needed, and then you go to another country where there is a huge shortage. How do you work together as global international organizations to bridge that and minimize the shortage?
You're exactly right. This is why I'm here today, to support the Queen Rania Teacher Academy, because you do such wonderful work in ensuring that, again, we attract teachers. We need stronger teachers. And so that every child has the opportunity for a high quality education, because we know that education is the pathway for a strong, healthy, productive life. As we see a huge demographic bulge in, for example, sub-Saharan Africa, the demand for teachers is only going to increase very significantly. So we do need a new generation of teachers that are ready to take on this challenge and being able to be a force in shaping our communities, our societies, and bring the best that they can bear.
Thank you, Luis. Thank you again for this very informative presentation, and definitely thank you for your time and for being with us, and looking forward to more conversations in the future. And again, I would like to thank the more than 600 participants or attendees now. So, and كمان مرة بعتذر عن الخلل الفني اللي صار في البداية، وإن شاء الله نوعدكم بتقديم المزيد واستضافة المزيد من الشخصيات العالمية في مجال education التعليم. Thank you, Louis, and back to you, Khalid and Dinas. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me. It's wonderful to be here.